my name is Jay, and according to my t-shirt, I do maps. And if you're in the wrong room, now's the time to leave. So let's start with a scenario. Is it possible for us to, right now, create an application that shows my location, can find the locations of some of my friends, get us to a restaurant so we can have a good meal together? So let's see if we can do that now. To find me, we use something called a class called the geopositioning info source. Now, for the BlackBerry 10, we've taken a subset of the Qt Mobility module that's publicly available. We've taken just a subset of it. One of the classes is the positioning info. So I'm going to use that class, and because of the fact I don't really need to know driving directions right now, I'm just going to use a single update, non-satellite, relatively cheap, quick, find out where I am. How do I put that on a map? I've got my position, I need to put it on a map. Okay. It's relatively easy and straightforward to convert from one type into the data structure that we use for showing on a map. Now, in my example application, I decided to create a series of layers for the types of information that I wish to put on. A layer allows me to show one set of information or remove it and so on and so forth. So I'm going to turn on the me layer. I don't really need to follow me. And there I am. I'm at the Ottawa International Airport. I've just arrived. How do I find my friends? Well, in this particular situation, I'm actually going to use the contacts application. I'm going to get my friends' addresses, and then I'm going to use the geocoding APIs on the device to figure out what that address means in terms of a latitude, longitude. The contacts application doesn't actually store this type of information. It just stores the address. So once I've gotten those addresses, gotten the latitude and longitude associated with them, turn on that layer, populate them on the map. These are things we can do right now. How do I find a good restaurant? Well, what I did was I wrote a Yelp layer so that it retrieves restaurants within my vicinity from Yelp 4 stars or above. Turn that layer on. Of course, you don't have to stick with Yelp. You can use whatever web APIs or internal sources that you wish. Create a layer based on that information, add it to the map. Again, these are 3 layers of information so that if you wish to, turn a layer off so you can remove information from the map. How do I pick a restaurant? Well, with the mapping APIs, you can interact with the map. So I've set up an association such that when I tap on a pin, I get the information associated with that pin. Oh, the San Curry House was relatively close to the vicinity of where my friends are. So, looks good, 4.5 stars. But I want to know more information about that restaurant. So, I've set up a listener for an event associated with that, with the dialogue that you see there. So when I tap on it, I go to the web page associated with that restaurant. So now I can read up on all of the reviews, the 1 stars, the 5 stars, whether or not it's my style of stuff. How do I tell my friends that this is a good restaurant and I think we should go there? Well, we're all aware of the sharing functionality. So I'm going to share the restaurant's location with my friends using any one of the standard core application ones, or if a third party comes along and registers themselves as a sharing, then I can query that and add it to my list. For this demonstration, I'm just going to use the email one. I'm going to pre-populate as much of the information as I can, allowing the third party, the user, to actually fill in the remaining information and send it as an email. Now, what's interesting about this email, I want to point this out, is that the URL that you see there is what's called a geolink, and I'll bring that up a little bit later on. But that's functionality that exists on all BlackBerries all the way back to 4.2. So if my friend Bob hasn't gotten the new Z10 because he asked me for it, I didn't give it to him yet, then he can still read this on his BlackBerry Bold. He can still get that information. So I send that information off to my friends. Now, how do I get there? Well, I've set up another association between the button on that dialog, I call it a go button, to start the route map invoker. What this does is it pulls up the mapping application and says, how do I go, what's the route from my location to the restaurant? So by clicking that, I get a path from me to the restaurant. These are all the things that we can do right now. So let's see, closer inspection, how we do those specific things. I mentioned before that we have a subset of the Qt mobility classes. So all the positioning information is done through these standard classes. If you use Qt mobility 1.2.2, this will seem like old hat. Show of hands, who is familiar with Qt mobility? Wow, okay, fine. You're going to learn something today then. This functionality you'll probably find on other mobile handsets. So if you're thinking about cross-platform, this will meet that need. To use Qt mobility, create a geoposition info source. And because it's an asynchronous situation, you have to set up a connection, and off you go. Qt mobility allows for all positioning methods, satellite positioning methods, and non-satellite positioning methods. Satellite is GPS, or I can't remember the Russian version, but satellite is satellite. Non-satellite is a combination of cell tower, Wi-Fi triangulation, etc. All is a hybrid mix of the two. Do you want a single shot, or do you wish to get continuous updates, and how frequently you want those updates? All standard part of the Qt mobility infrastructure. That information contains, the information that you get back, there's a lot of information, not just the coordinates, but also things like your direction, your speed, the accuracy of the hit. So if you wish to say, I think I'm here, but I'm actually somewhere between here, you're going to get that information back as well. You can continue to receive updates while the application is in background mode. And background mode here means not headless scenario, but while your application is in tiled or paused mode. You can still receive updates and therefore send information if you change position. Excuse me. You can also, I'll do that on the next slide. We get lots of questions about positioning. We got a lot of questions on the OS 7. We're going to get a lot more on 10. Things like, what's the best type of positioning to get? Non-satellite is quick. It's cell tower triangulation. Well, you're already connected to a cell tower. You've already got that information. It's very power saving, but it's not very accurate. 300 millimeter diameter circle. Sorry, 300 millimeter. I am Canadian. I am supposed to understand metric. 300 millimeter, so 300 meter average satellite.
Worst case? Like worst case, best case?
Yeah, it depends. There are so many variables involved. Are you in a concrete jungle that are blocking the cell towers? Are the Wi-Fis that you're connected to, are they known and their positions known? So I'm not going to answer that question. I'm sorry. The question was, what is the worst case scenario for non-satellite? Like I said, too many variables involved. Most accurate.
It's also the size of the itself could be absolute miles.
Yeah, there are so many variables, I really can't give you an answer. If you tell me this spot and why isn't this a good spot, then we can get down to specifics. Satellite is accurate, but if the GPS receiver is cold, it could take 30, 60 seconds to get a good, accurate position, but you can get 3-meter accuracy. If you are doing turn by turn, if you are doing anything like that, you pretty much have to stick to satellite. Hybrid, or all, is a combination of both. We start off with non-satellite to get you where you are, and then as it becomes available, we'll narrow down and continue to update you with that information. If I'm doing continuous, how frequently? Well, are you a car driving 60 kilometers an hour? Then you need 1-second updates. If you are a fleet manager and you've got a fleet of cars and you want to know where that car is and that car is supposed to send you location information, once every 30 seconds is probably enough. And you don't even need satellite. You can probably just get away with non-satellite. You don't really need to know exactly where they are. You just need to know generally where they are. Are they at that restaurant, or are they actually delivering the packages they're supposed to deliver? Power consumption. There, again, are too many variables involved. If you are in a concrete jungle and you're trying for satellite, it's going to try and get more information, get more information, get more information, and you're going to drain the battery very quickly. Line of sight, so on and so forth. Now, this is a piece of information that the GPS team did not want me to put on there. On average, your LCD consumes a lot of power. GPS, on average, can consume half of the equivalent power. Non-satellite, half of that again, or less. So, question is, you're on a mobile device, you've got a limited battery. Do you wish for that application to consume all of the power so the person has to change their battery on a frequent basis? Or do you wish to sip from the fountain? You have to figure out exactly what it is that you do need, how accurate you wish to be, and go from there. The web page documentation contains a lot of extra information. So, while we have done the Qt Mobility subset, let me go back a slide. This piece of information, for example, the background mode, that isn't in Qt Mobility. That is something that we have put in. It's an extension to the Qt Mobility. So we have other things that you can do using that extended set. So for example, if you wish to use only Wi-Fi as opposed to non-satellite, well then you can state only Wi-Fi. Do you wish to receive updates only if the accuracy is within this range? That's in the extended controls area. So there's a lot of information that I can't cover in an hour. I suggest you go see the documentation for that. You can also receive a lot of information concerning things like how many satellites have you got connected to. That'll give you an indication of whether or not you're approaching a jungle, a concrete situation. So you can see, okay, I've got 8 satellites on the go. I've got a very good situation here. Again, I recommend the documentation for that. It's all in part of the extended level. Geocoding. In my scenario before, that was converting addresses to latitude, longitude coordinates. Again, this is all part of Qt Mobility. We haven't done anything new here. What we have done is provided an internal plugin to the interface using our own geocoding services. So, get a search manager, set up a connection, because this is asynchronous. This will go off device. To perform a geocode, ask for a geocode, you will get a signal back saying, okay, this is what I think your address is, to convert it into coordinates. Now, when you perform a geocode, you can say, the address is Ottawa, Ontario. What you get back are coordinates here. Well, this is Ottawa, but I'm giving you this. So you have to take that into consideration sometimes. I've seen situations where an application has asked for a geocode of a large region, they've gotten back a point, and they've misinterpreted that information to mean this is the space. So we've seen it, I wanted to mention it, avoid that. Reverse geocoding, the exact opposite. I've got latitude, longitude. What does this mean in terms of human readable? It's the same setup as the previous slide. The only difference is you ask for reverse geocode. Golly gee, fancy that. What's different for the BlackBerry 10 as opposed to the Qt Mobility subset is that you can ask for boundaries. What does this mean? Well, the camera application is a good example of this. When I take a photograph with my camera, they like to embed into the photograph some metadata like latitude, longitude. But they also like to put into the IPC code Ottawa, Ontario, or Amsterdam, Netherlands. Well, to get that type of information, you do a reverse geocode where the boundary is only on the city. So the resulting address goes Europe, Netherlands, Amsterdam. Doesn't try and get street address, it just tries to get city address. The full list of boundaries is in the documentation, but you can do things like street, city, province, country, time zone, etc. Again, these are not part of the Qt Mobility subset functionality. These are things that BB10 has inside of it. If you are doing reverse geocoding, there's a good chance that that information is being cached for performance reasons. We can't cache street addresses because they are literally points on a map and they're far too point specific. But for example, to do a reverse geocode right here at the city level, I'll get Amsterdam. I go 1 mile that way, I do another reverse geocode, there's a good chance no network hit. You will get an immediate answer saying Amsterdam. Because when we got that answer back, we had got a little bit of a bounding box saying, oh, okay, when you did a reverse geocode of Amsterdam, I think this box, everything inside this box is on the device. So as long as you're within that box, no network hits. So good chance that you'll get high performance if you only ask for what you need to ask for. This is another thing that we've gotten questions about, where somebody gets information from one source and then tries to marry it up with a different source of geographic information. If I get information from TomTom and then I apply it on a map from Navtech, they may not be the same. I may be on the wrong side of the boulevard, or this type of thing. There's always a little bit of drift and always a little bit of interpretation. So be cautious about, I'm not saying don't, but just be aware that if you get information from one source and try and marry it up with another source, you may not get the exact results that you were looking for. All right, map views. MapView is the class in Cascades that we use so that you can draw a map along with the rest of the Cascades interface. It's very easy to set up. Create an instance, add it to your container, set the location that you wish to show. That's it. You don't have to worry about setting up panning, zooming, pinch. All those things are dealt with for you. So they're very consistent with the mapping application. You get the exact same data from the mapping application. It's consistent use and feel.
We already tried to work with it, and we wanted to place a bounding box of, let's say, 3 kilometers. But the only way you can get the distance is with a set altitude. So is there some kind of factor you can use to calculate what altitude you need to get, for instance, a bounding box of 3 kilometers?
Mm-hmm. I'll come back to that at the end of the presentation. And if I don't remember to come back to that, I've got a wooden bat in my backpack. You can beat me over the head with it. We use a class called GeoLocation. The MapView classes are very familiar with this class, and they're they talk to each other. This is the class that we use to represent the pin. So when I was showing all of those restaurant pieces of information on the scenario, there was one geolocation for each one of those restaurants. Create it, add it, off it goes. Yes?
They were all the same color. Can you add, like, customize?
I'll get there. Like I said before, all the user interactions are dealt with, but we do notify the parent application if you wish to enhance it. So, for example, tapping on the pin, we'll deal with that for you. Tapping on the caption dialog will send a signal to you. We won't interpret it for you. It's up to you to add the additional information associated with it. So in my example, I said that if you tap on the location caption, I'm going to go to the browser and then go to a specific location. So we've got things like notifying you when somebody zooms in, zooms out, pans. They tap on a pin. They do a long press on the pin. They do a long press on an empty space of map. They tap on the dialog, or they press the go button, so forth. So you can set up your application to respond to these actions, or you can ignore them, depending on the user scenario that you've got. Data layers. In my scenario, I use 3 different data layers. I use one for me, one for my friends, and one for the restaurant. They provide convenient ways of collecting bits of information so that when it comes time to adding it to the map, you simply create a new instance of it. Inside of your layer, you add or remove information as necessary, and you add it to the map. So when it comes, this is adding a block of information all at one time. I can turn off all those things all at one time. It's a convenience, per se. It's relatively easy. If, for example, the Yelp layer that I did before took all of about 100 lines to generate a URL, retrieve the JSON response, parse the information, generate geolocations for every restaurant, suck out the URL associated with every single restaurant, boom. And so now, in my example scenario, all I did was new Yelp, add it to map. The nice thing about layers is because it's an encapsulation of a single purpose, you can then share that amongst other versions of your application, other applications within your company, or you can, heck, you can probably make money if you sell that as a library to other developers. A layer can be static or dynamic. In my scenario, my friends' home addresses were static, so I didn't bother dealing with when the map moves. However, the Yelp restaurant layer, I can set it up such that if I move 5 kilometers to the east, I will then regenerate a list of restaurants and follow me as I drive along the road. So you can set up layers such that they are dynamic. Is that a question? No. Pin drop, we've got relatively simple functionality. If you wish to put a map on the screen and ask the user to select a location by dropping a pin where it is they wish to go to, we've got a convenience class for that. It's a very descriptive class name, map long press to pin drop. The public APIs really love this. The reviewers really love this name. You will get notified when that pin has been dropped. You will be notified again when we've reverse geocoded that into meaningful information. So then you can listen for that, and when you have the useful information, continue with your application's code. We're not quite done. We have some issues I'm going to bring to your attention. They are going to cause you frustration points. Hopefully the workarounds that I'm providing to you will not cause you to pull out your hair. So you can, in the APIs, you can add geolocations, you can remove geolocations, and the APIs allow you to move or change where a location is. Unfortunately, fortunately the data does change. Unfortunately, the rendered content doesn't. We know the data's moved, but the mapping layer underneath of us has ignored that request. So a move equals remove and add. That works. It's not pretty. If you wish to be notified of further changes concerning this, BB10791 will tell you when that fix has been uploaded. Issues with orientation change. Going like this will cause the map to kill itself. This is egg on my face, by the way. Lock the orientation. That's the workaround. We've got it fixed! It's just not in the builds you see. My apologies. The data layers have an API so that you say, set visibility off, and all the pins will disappear. Again, the underlying render layer doesn't know this. It does know it, it just hasn't done anything to update the tiles. So, back to the equivalent of move. If visibility on, great, add your data. If visibility off, remove all your data. That one's been fixed. Again, it's not in the APIs, it's not in the SDKs that you see right now. If you are in landscape mode only, and you have a pin on the screen, and you tap on the pin to pull up the caption dialog, for some reason or another, well, I know exactly what the problem is. The pin does not become selected. So this is a landscape-only issue. That subpoint is completely wrong. It's got nothing to do with the point above it, so there's nothing to see here. Now, okay, got it. Who remembers Ford, Model Ford T? You could actually buy them in green. Yes. The color black was because it was quick drying. That's why they chose black. Anyways, that's irrelevant. So, yes, any color you like as long as it's purple. I don't need to say anything, do I? How do you draw your own? Okay, you create a container, you put a map view in it, and then for every single pin that you want to see on the screen, you create an instance of a image view. Where do you place that to be? Purple, yellow, red, bullseye, what have you. Where do you place that image view? Well, MapView has a concept of window to world. You provide it world coordinates, it will give you window coordinates back. So that means that if I wanted if the pin is at this lat and long, ask for window to world, world to window, you'll get the coordinates of the screen, of the container, not the screen, but of the window, the container, where to place the pin. There's a signal within MapView, request render. If you listen for this signal, then you know when to update the locations of your image view icons. Now, this recipe does not have to stick to pins. This recipe is, let's say I'm writing a weather application, and I wish to overlay my map with red for areas where you have to be concerned, green for areas where you don't have to be concerned, and transparent for, orange for areas where we don't have information, so on and so forth. Or even some of the standard images that you would see on TV. This exact same recipe works there. So as the user pans the map, you will be notified. You then figure out where the map has moved and update your overlay as appropriate. There's a lot of information captured in this URL. And we go through the full code necessary, an example code of how to do it. We have used, what you see in this URL is what we are using right now for first-tier applications that were released along with the BlackBerry on day 0. So this is a tested solution. It is being used right now. It's very descriptive. If you wish to track the changes or the fixes on this particular issue, there's the number for it. All right. I don't want to talk about this here because it's probably far too advanced, but we have a modular system whereby if you wish to provide your own rendering engine for map content, you can do so. The entire system is plug-in. So therefore, if you wish to have a map of Disney World so that you show all the wonderful slides and park interesting things, you can do that. We've also got render engine switching such that if you only wish to render a certain zone, as the user pans out of that zone and you say, I don't know what to do, then we will pick a different rendering engine. Great for how do I drive to Disney World? But that's a relatively advanced scenario. Please come talk to me afterwards. Kind of hard to miss. Places Picker. This is kind of neat functionality in that it's the exact same information that the mapping application sees. So it's actually the same controls that the mapping application uses. What's different between places and contacts? Contacts is, well, let me put it this way. Places is a collection of location information. Everything in here has a set of coordinates associated with it. Whereas the contacts application could just be a telephone number or a business name. There might not be an address associated with it. Everything inside of the places is the same data that the map sees, is locations. If I'm in the mapping application and I say that this is a favorite of mine, and in the third-party application they use the Places Picker, up will come that favorite included within the list. It's a great way of sharing information across applications. This Places Picker comes as both a card, and that's how you would invoke the card. It also comes as a cascade control. If you do not, the thing about cards is that they're full screen. If you wish to have a subset so that you wish to have other controls within it, sure, you can do that. The Places Picker has a cascades control as well. The card version is blocking. The cascades control is non-blocking. Minor variation there. How do you use the mapping application? As part of your application. You can invoke the mapping application with useful information like go to this location. So, to show the map at location X, location map invoker, set latitude, set longitude, go. It's relatively simple. At that point, the mapping application will be brought up. You can ask the map to do searches within a specific region. So, for example, I know that I'm going to Bob's house and I'm getting low on gas, so I can ask for, do a search around that location for gas. You can ask for... Is
that as a card?
No, that is...
So separate app. Okay.
Yes, it is. It is invocation. It is not card. You can ask the mapping application to get me from point A to point B. This is, in my example application, this is what I called to get from the Ottawa International Airport to the Shan Curry House. Yes?
Do you have to set the start location?
Do I have to set the start location? I do not believe you have to do that. The mapping application knows where you are upon upon opening the application. It automatically starts positioning information, so it shouldn't need it. You can also, if you have a document that has got KML, if you've got a KML document with place marks inside of it, the mapping application recognizes a subset of KML, specifically the place marks, and we'll be able to show that information on the map. GeoLinks is another way to invoke the mapping application. Now, let me focus a little bit on GeoLinks. Like I said before, this is a recognized URL that works all the way back to, I think, 4.2. I don't think anybody's carrying a 4.2 around with. Does anybody know of anybody who's got something that old? To test. Instead of telling you what the format is for this particular URL, we've got a convenience class to do that for you. So if you wish to send an email or a BBM or an SMS or something to a friend who's got a BlackBerry, we don't want you to have to write the URL. Just the way to do it is create a view properties with the appropriate information, and then there's a function within the mapping module, generate map URL, off you go. Another way to share information between devices is automatic address recognition. Again, this is all the way back to 5. If somebody sends me an address in an email, as long as it's formatted properly, it'll become a hyperlink and invoke the mapping application when triggered. We use for lack of a better term, a relatively North American-centric definition of an address. So this will not work in Japan, where they use a different structure. Safest pattern is number, street, street type, city, region, country. We do recognize European things, like in Amsterdam right now. I've noticed that all the street numbers are on the back of the designation. Those work as well. We recognize those. The minimal amount of information for pattern recognition, for street address recognition, as long as you got the city and the city is very populous, we might recognize it. New York, London, Toronto, Paris, no problem. I'm not sure about Amsterdam. It's not as populous as the list of cities that we recognize by default. So, if you include country, there's a very good chance that this will be recognized by the receiver. Of course, if you give everything, we'll do it. You need an image of a map so that you can include it in your email, or put it as a backdrop for your application, or use it for some other scenario. We provide the functionality to do that as well. It's very similar to the GeoLinks. Just create a view properties. The only difference is you also have to set the window size, and off it goes. The only difference is this is asynchronous because of the fact we're having to go off device to get the information. Oh, too many words. All right. Here's a list of some of the things that are coming down the pipeline. We are adding new data types. So right now we've got geolocation. That is just a pin. We are adding things like lines, polygons, a point with a radius, therefore indicating how accurate a location might be. Circles, enhanced KML support. If we're going to introduce polygon, then there's no reason for us to not interpret polygons from KML. Different way to share information. So these are coming down the pipeline. Geo-monitoring. I wish I was in this department. This allows you to define a region and record an action associated with that region. So when I go into that region, something will be invoked. When I leave that region, something will be invoked. It uses the invocation system, so it's not tied to any particular application. But what this means is I want to tell my wife that I've landed at the airport. So I set up a region around the airport, and when I enter that region, it automatically triggers off a BBM to my wife. Jay has landed, you can stop worrying.
That would be nice.
So that,
Is there a way to get exclusive access to those messages? For example, if they were private?
there are security concerns associated with these types of things. I believe permissions are based on a per application. So if your application sets up a region and an action, your application will not have access to those regions and actions.
Okay, so the application has to set this up and remain running the entire time?
No, because they were using the invocation framework. What you do is you say, here's my region, here's the invocation string.
Right.
Because the invocation framework is not class-based or is not application-based or anything like that. It's just a matter of setting the name of the application, setting the data envelope associated with it. So all you're doing is setting strings, and that is your action associated with it. So it's a matter of, when I enter this region, start application X with this content of information. So it's all string, it's all soft APIs. But what it allows me to do is, to have that flexibility of, I'm not going to kill myself. I'm not going to stop my application, not kill myself. I'm going to stop my application, stop consuming things, and let the underlying operating system deal with tracking, positioning, and notify me when I've done something. I can see Foursquare just loving this, unfortunately overloading the system with every single little restaurant.
Any guesstimate on the timeline for this?
Geo-monitoring, because I am not in that department, I believe it is in the 10 time frame, so 10.1, 10.2, I'm not 100% sure. In other words, they're dotting the I's and crossing the T's stage, as opposed to 11 or something like that.
What is it called? Battery consumption for that function? So meaning triggering events means I have to track my position all the time to do that.
Like I said, I wish I was in that department. It's just so much fun. I don't know exactly what it is that they've done to deal with positioning, to keep that on a low power consumption level.
It's per device, and it's probably optimized to hell. So.
This is being implemented at an OS level. It's not an application-specific thing, and so.
No, okay. It's probably also about density of regions I've marked.
Yep. They've got algorithms involved with how fast are you moving, therefore what type of system do I need, what type of tracking methodologies do I need? If I'm not moving very fast, well then I'm going to turn off my satellite. Don't worry, I've seen them before. You can stand from.
One small question to this. May it be a good idea to turn off the satellite and turn it on the location, and from which level it's a good idea? If I need the information every 10 minutes, it's okay to turn it off, or is it already a good idea to turn it off every 10 seconds? Which level?
Are you referring to specifically the geo-monitoring functionality, or are you asking generally about positioning?
More battery consumption related to save power.
It's a very use case scenario question. It's a matter of what information do you need? Are you in control of turn by turn? Then you need X. If you are a receiver of information from somebody else, like the fleet manager situation, and I'm writing an application for the car, for the driver, I don't need GPS. I don't need once a second. I need once every 30 seconds or once a minute, or, it's so application specific. I can't give an answer to, I think there's around 60 people here. I can't give an answer directly, but there are ways, if you wish to, if you know what scenario types you need, then yes, there are algorithms that you can use in conjunction with that.
But turning it on and off will need also to use power. Or need more power than let it turn on. Or it's this.
I think he's asking, is there an overhead, turn it on, turn it off?
No, no, I do not. I'm not aware of any overhead associated.
There will be an overhead if you leave it off too long and it goes cold, and then it has to search for satellites.
Sorry, yes. In that situation where a GPS is trying to find something because it's cold or it's in a concrete jungle valley, then the GPS is going to be very power consumptive while it's trying to connect. And so turning off and then turning back on again, yes, you're going to take a power hit when you turn back on again, definitely. Any other questions? Yes?
I've got a question. You've got geo-monitoring, but you don't have any, well, unless this is further on in the slide, you don't have any ability to say, give me a fix within, say, 5 minutes, or if I've moved 100 meters.
I'm not going to tell you yes or no.
Because that sort of fits in exactly with geo-monitoring.
Again, I'm not going to tell you yes or no until they announce it.
Okay.
One more quick question.
Yes.
You mentioned that you could subscribe to updates to a tiled application. Can you do it to an headless?
Sorry.
So you can subscribe to updates. Okay, so the question was, is this on?
Yep.
Yeah, there we go. The question was, we saw a slide, I think it's one of the first slides, where you could subscribe to updates, location updates.
Yes.
For a tiled application. The background, it said.
Okay, yes.
Can you do it for a headless application?
No.
That was, I figured.
Yes. Sir?
You've got the C++ and I guess in future some more QML. Is there any native interface to any of this other than the invocation stuff?
Yes. The MapView control itself is QML compliant. And so the control is easy to import maps, MapView, set location, deal with all the triggers and all the associations. We do not have full QML support for things like the locations and the layers and the data structure. Our MapView API is model view controller paradigm. So I can have one data container being used by two different map views at the same time. Same data being shared across multiple. And so we haven't quite finished the QML to deal with that scenario. But that's part of the coming soon.
But it's inherently cascades. It's not, there's no native APIs to any of this.
This is all cascades. I've skipped over a couple of slides here. Lots of information. Lots of information. Specific, this red pointer isn't very sharp. That. Cascades, sample apps. Lots and lots of information and demonstrations of how to use the stuff. And Shadid, Hack, and Gazito are two great contacts for this type of stuff. Shadid and I were the two people who sat down and wrote the whole how do I do a different color than purple solution. So he is very good contact information. So people taking photographs of that slide, I'll just let it sit there. Are there any other questions? Okay, that means I said too much. If there are no other questions then, thank you very much for your time.